very humbling to be up here today and speak to you about one of Jesus' most powerful prayers. It's not a long prayer, but it's a very powerful prayer. The prayer is only 12 words long. 9 of the words are only single syllable words. So there's nothing profound to this, but it's a powerful prayer in and of itself. What I want us to do is I want us to pray this prayer together this morning. So if you would, as we begin this message this morning, if you would pray this prayer that Jesus prayed. It's found in Luke 23, verse 34. Caitlin, if you put it up. Pray this with me. It says, Father, with me here, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Jesus prays this prayer after he had been bloodily beaten within an inch of his life. He had a crown of thorns pushed upon his head, had been stripped naked, and then having had spikes driven through his wrists and his ankles, to which the men who had just done these malicious acts were now at the feet of Jesus playing poker to decide who would get Jesus' clothes that they had just stripped him of. I might have said something there that you hadn't heard before, because a lot of people, when we think about Jesus on the cross, we think that he was just hung on the cross, and a lot of times we even think about the fact that when he was put on the cross, the nails were through his hands and his feet. Well, that's not true, so don't look at like those images because they're wrong. Because if that had been the case, they would have just torn through. The nails would have, his weight was too heavy so they had to go through the tendons in his arm to hold him up. But also, we picture Jesus on the cross, and we like to be politically correct, and to do that, you can't be naked. You can't have a naked guy on your cross that you carry, on around your neck. So we put clothes on him. Well, he would have been naked. They stripped him of all of his dignity that he would have had, and they placed him on a cross naked. And they literally, it says that they casted lots, which in our day would have been similar to playing poker, to see who would win and who would get his robe and his clothes that he had. These men were not choir boys by any sense of the mean. No, these men were such bloodthirsty men. The only job the Romans could find for these men to do was to be cold-hearted crucifiers. They were professional, legal murderers, and they loved their job. It was their job to kill people. And they were happy to do it. And it was these men that Jesus looks towards heaven and prays on their behalf these 12 words. These men who had just done these acts to him. And he hangs on a cross and he prays, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. So point number 1 this morning is going to come early in the message, and it's going to come hard right out of the gate. So here you go. Here it is. Point number 1, if you will, Kaylin. You can tell a lot about a person by what they pray when they've been wronged. You can tell a lot about a person by what they pray when they've been wronged. Let's face it, all of us have been wronged at some point in our lives, right? And some of us more often than others, and some of us it may seem like a pretty frequently often thing that happens to you. As a matter of fact, I'll just tell you one of the things that happened to me. I was wronged this last weekend on my vacation, of all things. I was wronged. Jennifer and I went and we spent a rare weekend away, and we went to big old Louisville, Kentucky. That was a joke, by the way. We stayed in a beautiful hotel that was just off of the University of Louisville campus. And the hotel was great. The guest services people were nice, and they helped us out. They spoke to us nicely. They welcomed us. And then we stayed the first night, and we went to church that next morning, and then we went to the Churchill Downs for some races, and it was time for us to eat, so I stood up to get up, and my back was kind of tight. Didn't think anything of it then, so I just went on. So that night, Sunday evening, my back was killing me. I mean, it was just tight. And Jennifer, every time I would get up out of the bed, we were watching TV, and her bed's like flat, and mine's like sinking down like this, and she's like, "Man, chubby." And I'm like, "What? I mean, I'm not that heavy." And so she gets up, and she goes to the bathroom, and then all of a sudden it hits me. I get up, and I start looking. These are sleep number beds. No sign. No nothing telling me, hey, you're going to have a miserable night unless you correct the dial to the setting you want it. So I was miserable. I came home and had to go to the doctor. My back hurt so bad. I was wronged. A friend of mine told me that he went to a conference and he was wronged. He stayed in this hotel, and he had to be up the next morning. He had to be up that morning pretty early, so he didn't have time to go get breakfast. So he called down. He was in New York City, and he called down for room service, a coffee and a muffin. And then he got the bill. Coffee and a muffin, $40.60. He was wronged. That's robbery. We're wronged every day. But it's how we respond when we're wronged that matters the most, and it tells the most about a person. So for this message, I have kind of put together kind of what I would say 3 categories or levels of being wronged. So here's wrong number 1. I call this one, really? Because these are the people, and I'm just as guilty as this, as I'm sure Jennifer has thought this many times in her head, but these are scenarios that I would say, when you're hearing this as the listener, it's kind of like, really? You're mad about that? That is what your heart and your mind is concerned about? Kind of like the church that I came from, Jennifer and I attended before we came here. When they built their new sanctuary, they had fights over the color of the carpet. And quite frankly, the color they picked is ugly. Really? I've heard people say, my neighbor mowed. I actually had a neighbor like this. You mowed on my side of the property. We live out in the country. Each of us have 2 acres. Who cares if I mowed on your side of the property? My neighbor's tree hangs over my property, and in the fall, I have to clean up all of their leaves that come from their tree. Really? That's what's going to keep you up at night? With all of the things that are going on and going wrong in this world today, you're going to let those things stress you out. Really? 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 5 says, love, it does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. And it keeps no record of wrongs. It keeps no record of wrongs. You see, the serious-minded Christ follower who is filled daily by the grace and mercy of God is able to look over life's minor irritations. Those are minor things. Those are things that I don't need to worry about, because in the end, the only person that it's going to hurt is me. A pastor friend of mine was telling me about a time where he traveled with another pastor friend, and they were going to a conference. And as they're traveling together, this other guy was going on about how he had gotten the hotel to upgrade his basic room to a deluxe suite. and with no charge. So he was paying the same price that my pastor friend was paying for his little rinky-dinky room. And so he just kept going on and just like rubbing it in his face. And, hey, you can come to my room if you want. I got plenty of room. And so they go up to the counter to check in, and the guy says, okay, I would like my room that I got upgraded to. And the lady at the front desk says, I'm sorry, that room's not available. It was given to someone else. My pastor friend said to himself, he's like, this is going to be good. And he just kind of sits back and waits on it. And this other guy says, okay, no problem. First world problem. Move on. Thanks for trying. But I love the phrase that he used. First world problem. Meaning that problem is not going to affect my eternity. That problem is not something worth fighting over. It's not something worth arguing over because it has no weight, it has no value to my eternity. And so he takes his life and he looks at the problems at his life and he says, first world problem, second world problem. What's more important? Just an interesting concept when we get angry. When things don't go exactly the way we want or expect, or the way we expect them to go in that moment, your heart is open for the whole world to see you. Have you ever seen that person? Here's one for you. Have you ever been shopping, like Black Friday shopping? I don't know. Just don't go if you haven't, because it's a nightmare. Because the first time I ever went, Jennifer and I were married, and I was supposed to get pajamas for the kids. Like, okay, no problem. I could get pajamas for the kids. Heck no, I'm not getting pajamas for the kids. Those women are fighting. I'm not going near them. They're literally throwing punches over $3 pajamas. It's like, why? Because the thing was, after all of the people had gone and left and I've gone through the store and no one's getting pajamas anymore, the rack is still full of pajamas. Why? There's no point. It was pointless. Sometimes we need to change up the way that Jesus prayed that prayer. Sometimes we need to pray, Jesus, forgive me, for I don't know what I'm doing. Forgive me, because I've lost it. I'm letting these little things that don't really matter at all have control over my life. Category number 2. Call this one betrayal. This is a similar situation where a trusted friend you may have confided in, and you've gone to them and you told them something that was meant to be between you and this other person, and it was not supposed to get out. If this person told anyone else, it could really hurt you as a person. And I'm not just talking about your image, I'm talking about it would hurt you. Because you went to them in confidence and they ended up telling other friends or other people. And before you know it, the whole town knows about what happened. And you didn't want people to know. And now people are going to look at you differently because of something that you had told your friend. So you've been betrayed by them. And this is a situation where it's a legitimate betrayal. It's not just something you went and you told this person some gossip that you're quite frankly gossiping about yourself, and you said, don't tell so-and-so I told you, and then that's your own fault. You shouldn't have said it in the first place. But when you're talking to someone and it's like a serious thing, like a prayer request, like sometimes I have people that will say, they'll call and they'll say, hey, will you pray for this, but don't put it on the prayer chain. Now, if I, as the pastor, turned around and went right to the prayer chain, just told everyone, went directly to your phones, and now you're listening to this prayer request that this person said, please, Pastor, I want it to just stay with you. That would be a pretty big betrayal, right? So Jesus tells us three things. He shows us three things of how we can handle this situation like this. How do we handle a situation where we've been betrayed? The first one, it comes in Matthew 18, verse 15. I'm not going to read it in full, but I'm going to tell you pretty much what it says. But go back and look at that verse. Look up that section there of Matthew 18, starting in verse 15. What Jesus starts out by saying, the first order of business is that if you were wronged, is you're to go. You're to go to the person that wronged you. Go back, Caleb. Okay, it messed up. So the first one is you go. You go to the person that has wronged you. Number two is you go in private. You go in private to the person. You don't call a pre-meeting with your best buddy and tell them how this person wronged you and go off on them and just kind of get yourself all stirred up even more and then go talk to this person. No, you go in private. The only suggestion I would recommend of talking with someone before you go is a situation like this. There's a lot of times where I just get so frustrated and I'm going on and on and on and on like to myself and I'm just getting myself going. I'll call Jennifer because she's my filter. She's able to tell me and help me differentiate between, well, first you need to calm down. You need to plan out what you want to say. Because if you don't plan it out, you know you're just going to go off on every little tangent and it's not going to make any sense. So she goes, I mean, I'm sure she has this list in her mind, like this is what he needs to do. And so she helps me kind of calm down. If you have a person like that, that's okay. But not someone who just fires you up even more and says, go get him, and you're all fired up to kill when you get there. So first off, you go in private. You don't call a big meeting and then the person gets ambushed when they show up. No, just you and this person. Number three, the most important, you come with a spirit to reconcile. You come with a spirit to reconcile. Have you ever sat down with someone and all they do is begin to beat you over the head with how you wronged them? And they're just going on and rattling off this list. And you know that the only thing they want is for you to say, I'm sorry, it was all my fault. And even if you say you're sorry, you know 2 weeks later they're going to beat you over the head with it because they really didn't forgive you. Because they were just flat out angry that you wronged them. But if you go with a spirit to reconcile with this person, and you're saying, my chief goal is to make our relationship healthy. And whatever's going on between us, it's not healthy right now, and it's putting up barriers and dividers in our relationship. And if this keeps going, our relationships are just going to break and fall apart, and we're just going to split apart from each other. But if you go with the sole purpose of mending your relationship, you'll find that 90% of the time, your relationship will be restored. I mean, this is the whole point why Jesus Christ came on the earth and died for our sins, was so that we could be reconciled to God, so that we could have that relationship. So if Jesus hadn't have come, we'd still be living old temple style, where I would be the only person that could go into the holy place before God, and all of you have to stay out in the courtyard and hum some songs. So thank God that's not the case. So Matthew 18, verse 15 describes the what you should do. Matthew 5, verses 23 and 24 tells us when. It tells us the when. says, therefore, if you offer your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. That's huge. Jesus is literally saying that if you're in the middle of worship, even to a point today, if you're coming and your purpose here today is to worship God, even if you're in the middle of worship and you have something against someone else or someone has something against you, stop what you're doing and go and be reconciled to that person. And when you're reconciled and when that healthy relationship is restored, then come back and continue your worship to me. Jesus is literally saying, stop singing your songs and go reconcile with the person that you need to. Because you see, what happens is when we come together as the body of Christ to worship, are we fully committed to our worship if we're thinking about what someone did to us earlier this week? If we're thinking about the argument that we had in the car on the way here? Why is it that 90% of arguments happen on the way to church? Why? Why do we choose that moment to just air the dirty laundry that we have in our frustrations for the week? That's why Jennifer and I drive separately. It's not really, but it sounded good. The third one is the how. There's going to be times when you go with a spirit to reconcile, and for whatever reason, the other person has no thought in their mind that they're going to forgive you at all. So then what? Then what are we supposed to do? Romans 12:18 tells us. Darcy read it for us just a little bit ago. It said, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. So if it is possible, as far as it depends on you. So whose job is it? It's yours. Because you're the only person that can control you and your actions and how you respond to things. So you go with a spirit to reconcile the relationship. And if that relationship cannot be reconciled, it's not on you. It's on that person. Because you've done what you had to do. You've done your part. But here's the thing, make sure you've done your part. Because a lot of times we like to say we attempted when we really didn't. See, this isn't something, when I'm talking about being betrayed, this isn't something that we send an email about. This isn't even something we text or we pick up the phone and call them. This is something where you sit down with that person face to face and you seek to reconcile with them. Category number 3. Call this one a dreadful injustice. Not everyone will experience a category 3 wrongdoing, and I hope that for your sake that you don't experience a category 3. This would be something similar to a child being killed, a woman being raped, or a home being destroyed by another person. A drunk driver killing an innocent couple as they just spent a magical night at their prom. These betrayals that go even beyond betrayal to an injustice. Victoria Rivolo was driving home one night on a New York roadway, not knowing that she was just minutes from a category 3 wrongdoing. Driving from the other direction, so coming towards her, were 6 teenagers who were up to no good and had just stolen a credit card and had purchased a large amount of things. And one of the last things that they purchased as they went back, and they found on the video camera of the store that they had purchased a frozen 20-pound turkey. And as they approached Victoria's car, one of the men in the passenger seat named Ryan grabs the frozen turkey and throws it over the car as they're going the opposite direction. As he launches the turkey into the air, into oncoming traffic, the 20-pound turkey smashes into Victoria's windshield, breaking every single bone in her face. After months of surgeries and indescribable pain, she decides to learn more about this boy who is about to be sentenced and could be sentenced up to 25 years in prison. She learns that Ryan came from a broken home and that prior to this, he had not had any criminal activity he doesn't have a criminal past. She decided that she would go to the prosecutor and she would ask the prosecutor to seek the least amount of sentence that he could receive. The prosecutor kind of pleaded with her, you really don't want to do this. You want to let the courts handle it, and kind of wanted to push back, but she was persistent and she kept just pleading for the prosecutor to seek the minimum sentence. And on the day of the sentencing, Victoria was granted permission to speak before the judge who was about to sentence Ryan. And she said, "Ryan, there's no room in my life for vengeance. I have asked the judge to be lenient upon you, and if my generosity will help you mature into a responsible, compassionate, honest man whose graciousness is a source of pride to your loved ones, then I will truly be gratified, and my suffering will not have been in vain." And the judge gave the sentence of 6 months in jail when he could have served up to 25 years in jail. And Ryan began to speak and just began to sob and just pour out the sorrow that he had for what he had done. And as they're getting ready to take Ryan out, he walks right past Veronica and he stops and he goes back. He looks her in the eye and he can tell that it's okay. And they hug. And they begin to just weep and just hold each other. And before long, the judge is watching this, and the judge begins to cry, and the prosecutor and the defense, and the whole courtroom is just weeping over watching this act of forgiveness take place. A woman who was just minding her own business, had just had a magical night watching her niece perform at a concert, and she's on her way home, and just to have an act like that happen to her. In our minds, we give her the okay to be angry. We give her the okay to seek revenge. That guy should get the full sentence that he deserves. But you see, she learned something when she went to church. She paid attention when she read her Bible where Jesus said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they are doing." And so before the court that day, she publicly forgave him. Radical forgiveness is a powerful thing. It is life transforming. Radical forgiveness comes from a heart that understands that you have also been graciously forgiven for the things that you have done. We've all sinned. We all do it. We've all wronged people around us. But it tells a lot more about who you are by what you pray when you've been wronged. We open with a song called "It Is Well." Horatio Spafford wrote that song. And he wrote it from a place of tremendous heartache. You see, for whatever reason, his family was traveling to America. But he had business that he needed to finish at work in England. And so he sent his family on the boat ahead of him. And what he didn't know was that his family would be killed in a shipwreck. Word got back to him that his family had died. But he still made the trip. And so as he is traveling to America, he comes to the place where the ship had gone down. And he begins to pen those words. It is well with my soul. How in the world could it be well with your soul when you're at the place where your children and your wife were taken for no apparent reason? There was nothing you could have done. You couldn't protect them. You couldn't even attempt to save them. But your family's just stripped away from you. And he's able to say that it's well with his soul, that his soul is where it needs to be. See, because it's in a moment like that where he can say, God, I don't know why, but I forgive you. You know, sometimes we can't explain why things happen. We'll never understand sometimes the mysteries of life when people are taken from us. You know, why are young children taken from us? But sometimes for our sake, not so much for God's sake, because it's not always God's fault, right? I mean, a lot of times it can be our fault. But for whatever reason, sometimes we need to say, God, I forgive you. Because if I don't forgive you in my heart, I'm going to hold this grudge against you, and I'm not going to like you, and I'm not going to go to church, and I'm not going to sing those songs, and I'm not going to read the Bible, and I'm not going to live for you, because this is going to be something that stands between you and me. But for me, I need to forgive. You see, Jesus needed to forgive those men because he couldn't allow the creation to not be forgiven by the Creator. So Jesus stands in the gap. He says, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Maybe you need to pray that prayer I mentioned earlier where you say, Father, forgive me, for I don't know what I'm doing. I pray that if that is something you need to do, do it. Don't let something stand in between you and life. Don't let bitterness and worry and stress of something someone else has done to you stop you from forgiving them. Some of the healthiest people are the people who can forgive freely. As we come to a table today, we come and we remember the act of sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. And we celebrate his life. Because you see, we're able to forgive because he forgave us. He forgave us of the sins of our lives. He forgave us of the things that we're going to do to other people. And he said, you're forgiven. And we remember this meal. We celebrate this communion so that we can have that relationship, that bond with Christ of knowing and celebrating and remembering that it was because of your sacrifice, the blood of yours that was spilled and the body that was broken for us so that we could have life. And so that we could have that reconciliation take place and have a relationship with God our Father. And so as we celebrate communion this morning, I pray that you will each pray a prayer before you receive these elements. I pray that you will pray that prayer of, Jesus, forgive me, for I do not know what I am doing. Ushers.